Stop, you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now, we have new stories every day. Now let's go. I had barely checked in my hotel and was more than ready to crash when my phone buzzed. It was my boss, calling with one of those last-minute demands. She needed me back at the office by 8 a.m. No exceptions. I let out a sigh, realizing I had to book a flight, pack up, and hustle to the airport. It was too late to call Kathy without waking up the kids, so I thought it'd be easier to just head home, sneak in, grab what I needed, and head out again. The house was dark, save for the soft glow coming from our bedroom. As I moved quietly through the entryway, I heard voices, Kathy's and a man's. My heart sank. The kids were probably staying with her sister. My gut twisted as I pieced it together. Kathy was having an affair. My grandparents' old advice ran through my mind, keep calm, don't act in anger. I took a few deep breaths, knowing my temper could flare, just like my grandfather's, a legacy he had warned me could ruin everything if I ever lost control. I decided against the confrontation, at least for now. I needed proof. I pulled out the new smartphone my employer had issued me. It had a crystal-clear camera, plus a mic and a battery-saving flash drive. Hiding in the shadows, I began recording. Seeing Kathy with him cut deep, but I pushed down the hurt. I deal with this calmly. I also planned to get DNA tests for the kids. If she was capable of this, who knew what else she lied about? While recording, though, I overheard something that made me snap. I couldn't hold back any longer. I burst into the room, tackled the man, whose name I later learned was Tom, and fought him until I'd chased him out of the house. Kathy was cowering in a corner, looking completely stunned. Get over here, I said, voice firm. It felt surreal, like I was watching this scene unfold from outside myself. Every time the temper of mine took over, I'd almost black out, barely remembering what happened afterward. This was only the fourth time I'd hit that level. Get over here, I repeated, and she crawled closer, fear written all over her face. I'm so sorry, Arthur. I'm so sorry, she whimpered. I felt my anger boiling over. Spare me the apologies, Kathy. What about all those times with Tom? Regret those too. She shook, her eyes wide with terror. Her mouth opened and closed, too scared to answer. Please, she stammered, don't hurt me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You disgraced this house, our bedroom, our bed. I spat, my voice dripping with disgust. You betrayed not only me, but also our children. She paled, visibly shaking. I felt the rage in me calm a bit as if the storm inside was finally easing. You'll pack your things and be out of here by noon, I told her, pointing to the bed. Take everything in here, especially the bed. Leave my stuff neat on the floor. Respect what's mine. Understood. Her voice was barely a whisper. How am I supposed to do all this? Figure it out. Maybe call those brothers of yours I lent money to. Noon, I growled, making it clear there'd be no second chances. Kathy nodded, curling into herself as I left the room. I grabbed my bags, threw them into my car, and took a quick glance around. Tom had disappeared, thankfully. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as I climbed into the driver's seat. My nose was broken and blood stained my shirt, a nice touch to my otherwise exhausted appearance. Ignoring the pain, I drove to the nearest hospital. The doctor's assessment wasn't pretty: broken nose, a couple of cracked ribs, possible concussion, and a smattering of bruises and cuts. They wanted to admit me, but I refused. I had work to get back to, and besides, I'd be fine. When the police arrived, I downplayed the incident, saying I'd been attacked but didn't remember much, just that I'd come out the worse. Since Tom wasn't in the ER, I figured he'd walked away mostly unscathed. Back at work, I went straight to my boss, Rachel Parker, the VP. Her office had a private bathroom, so I washed up there, hoping to get my head straight before the day began. When I stepped out, I saw Kathy's brother waiting in the lobby. He looked just as bad as I felt, probably hearing the news. I took a moment to gather myself, then stepped into Rachel's office to give her a rundown. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said, I know a good divorce lawyer. Fiona, a college friend, she'll help you out. After a quick call to Fiona, Rachel turned back to me. She can see you this morning, she said. Now, what happened? Let's just say I came home and got an unwelcome surprise. Know anyone else who might help me handle all this? She nodded sympathetically. Rachel is good like that, supportive, grounded, even when things hit the fan. She handled the work that morning while I sat next to her, giving the details to Fiona so I wouldn't have to keep repeating myself. For the next hour, I worked with Rachel to fix some mess my brothers had left behind in the company. Rachel and I could have doubled this place's success if it weren't for them dragging us down. Fiona arrived promptly, and I shared the story, though I left out anything about the darker side of my temper. I just explained that I blacked out in Ratch, and then showed her and Rachel the recording. In the video, Tom asked Kathy, am I more important to you than your kids? Kathy's response was chilling, I'm yours. I don't care about them. Fiona and Rachel stare at me, both visibly taken aback. Fiona, I want full custody, I said firmly, even if I have to give up a large chunk of assets. I don't want to pay a cent in child support if it means she's in control. I added, my kids are with her parents right now, and I need to go get them. Arthur, Fiona replied, I'll fight for you, but even with this recording, full custody will be an uphill battle. She might claim she just said that in the heat of the moment. Fiona then pulled out a few forms. I'll draft some preliminary documents, give Kathy my card, and have her lawyer reach out to me. And Arthur, she added with a serious look, stay calm. Don't let your anger get the better of you. I nodded, feeling a bit ashamed. Thanks, Fiona. I'll stay level-headed. Fiona and Rachel exchanged a few quiet words, then Fiona left. Rachel and I returned to work, but a wave of tension came over me. I realized the anger simmering inside me was getting anxious about Kathy moving out by noon. Part of me felt like telling her to stay, but that fierce, uncontrollable part of me wanted her gone. Fast. Rachel, I said, glancing at the time, I need to take care of something personal. It shouldn't take more than an hour or two. I'll be back as soon as I can. Of course, Arthur. You've been a huge help today. Just don't be gone too long, Rachel replied with a smile. I hurried to my car, hoping to keep that anger in check. When I arrived home, I spotted a rental truck in the driveway, Kathy's brothers hauling out the mattress. 2 police cars were also parked there, with 3 officers watching the scene. I grabbed my laptop and approached the officers cautiously. I have a recording that might help explain everything that went down last night. May I show it to you? I asked. One of the officers, a tough-looking woman, looked at me closely. Are you Arthur Lane, Kathy's husband? Yes, Sergeant. I'll answer any questions you have. Just please take a look at this recording first. The sergeant nodded, though she looked like she was ready to restrain me at any moment. Okay, Mr. Lane, we'll watch it, but stay right here. You have my word, Sergeant, I assured her. I started the video, turning the volume up so everyone nearby could hear. At the part where Kathy said she didn't care about the kids playing, she fumbled the box she was carrying, her face paling. While she scrambled to pick up her things, I noticed a small bag of white powder fall out of one of the boxes. Ah, Sergeant, you might want to check that out, I said, gesturing toward the powder. The sergeant caught sight of it too and immediately called for backup, springing toward Kathy. I remembered a detail from the recording and zoomed in on a mirror on the bedside table, showing a line of white powder. I showed it to another officer who called the surgeon over. The sergeant quickly handcuffed Kathy, who started to cry, her brothers watching in stunned silence. Sergeant, what's going on? I asked, trying to process everything. Your wife's under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. We'll confirm it through tests, but it looks like she's been using it, the sergeant replied. What about my kids? When can I get them? I asked, my concern growing. Where are they? She asked, her tone softening. They're at her parents' place about 5 miles from here. The sergeant looked at me thoughtfully. If I were you, I'd go get them right away. Your wife's in custody, so you have the right. I felt both relief and worry flooding in. Of course, I need to pick them up, but I don't want any issues in front of the kids. The sergeant nodded. I'll stay until the movers finish and then follow you to your in-laws' house. We'll make sure it's handled smoothly, but I'll need a full statement about your injuries. I explained. I came home and found Kathy with Tom Brossman. I recorded it, and when Kathy said that awful thing about our kids, I just lost it. The next thing I knew, I was telling her to leave by noon. After that, I went straight to the hospital. I'm not even sure how I got hurt or if I injured Tom. I handed her the hospital documents listing my injuries. She raised an eyebrow. Anything hurting right now? Oddly, no, but I know it'll catch up to me soon enough, I replied, feeling a wave of dizziness hit. You have remarkable eyes, by the way, I added with a faint smile, leaning against her patrol car. Maybe I should take you back to the hospital, she suggested, looking concerned. I'll be fine. Just exhausted, I barely slept for 2 hours. I need to get my kids and get back to work. Thankfully, we have daycare there, so they'll be taken care of, I explained. All right, but I'm coming with you to pick them up, she said firmly. I thanked her as we waited for Kathy's brothers to finish. Once they were done, I locked the house and got into the surgeon's patrol car. On the drive, she offered a bit of advice. If I were in your shoes, I'd file for temporary custody and get a restraining order to keep her away from the house and the kids for now. With her in custody, this is your chance to set things straight, she advised. I will, I assured her, calling Fiona and updating her on the situation. Fiona agreed to handle the necessary paperwork by morning. By this point, I'd started calling the surgeon by her first name, Rose, and even flirted a little. She gave me a mix of wary and amused glances. Aren't you a bit too cheerful for a guy going through all this, she asked. I'm about to see my kids. I thought I'd be kept away from them for a while. I've got good people looking out for me. Kathy's betrayal hurt, sure, but I'm not going to let it ruin my life. I'm focusing on what matters. In other words, I'm going to take time to enjoy life, Rose, I replied, winking at her. She shook her head with a slight smile. I don't know if you're wise, crazy, or just sleep-deprived. We arrived at my in-laws' place without incident. Rose informed them that we were taking the kids, and they didn't put up a fight. They'd never liked me much anyway, and I suspected they knew about Kathy's infidelity. My kids were thrilled to see me, especially when they saw the patrol car. Hope, my oldest at 5, was begging to hear the siren, while my youngest, Jack, at 3, wanted to sit on Rose's lap. Introducing her as Aunt Rose only earned me a playful glare. Aunt Rose, will you come to our house? Hope asked, her little eyes full of excitement. I can't, sweetie. I'm too busy, Rose replied with a soft smile when Hope asked her to stay for dinner. Curious, I asked, so Rose, what hours do you usually work? 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, she replied, watching me cautiously. Then you're free for dinner tomorrow at 6:30, right? I suggested. Hope, you can show Aunt Rose your doll collection. Hope lit up. That's awesome, Daddy, she exclaimed. Rose looked caught off guard. Arthur, you wouldn't want to disappoint Hope, would you? I gave her a hopeful look. With a resigned sigh, Rose turned to Hope and asked, all right, Hope, what should we have for dinner? Chicken. Hope decided, giggling. Fine, I'll bring some ice cream too, Rose added, shaking her head. Just for the kids' sake and to keep an eye on you. You're acting different. Thanks, Aunt Rose. Hope and Luke chores as Rose pulled up to my office building to drop us off. I waved goodbye, grateful for her support. As she drove away, I caught a glimpse of her looking contemplative. She seemed conflicted, muttering under her breath, what am I even doing here? Arthur could still be in serious trouble if Tom Grossman presses charges, and yet I can't believe I was actually called to his house. She continued to reflect as she drove. I've admired Arthur Lane for years. Seeing him every weekend at the park with his kids, I thought he was incredible. Those times we chat, I'd have to hide how nervous he made me, and now he flirted with me. Me? I don't even know why he bothered. I'm not exactly a model. Thank God I didn't have to arrest him. As for me, I dropped the kids off at daycare and headed to Rachel's office. The odd way I'd been acting, especially around Rose, might have been from lack of sleep or maybe something else. Strangely, I didn't feel like grieving my marriage. It was as if the emotional weight had lifted a long time ago. Rachel and I finished up the day's work, and as we were wrapping up, I asked, Rachel, I might need tomorrow off. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up with everything. Take the day, Arthur. Call if you need anything but get some rest, she replied, sympathetic. We got home, I ordered pizza for dinner. The kids asked about their mom, and I kept it simple, explaining that Mom and Dad had a big argument, but that we both love them. Because of the fight, Mom's going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a while, I added. It's okay, Daddy. As long as you're here with us, we're happy, Hope said, squeezing me tightly. I realized how many nights they'd likely spent with their grandparents while Kathy was doing whatever she was doing. A ping of anger hit me, but I shook it off. That night, I arranged for an emergency nanny to come by early. I put a spare key under the doormat, just in case I couldn't get up in time. Then, I moved most of our joint savings into my personal account and canceled the credit cards we shared. I considered emptying our safe deposit box since I had the only key, but figured I'd think it through first. I made sure we all slept in the guest bedroom's double bed, so I could be there if the kids needed anything. In the morning, Hope and Luke woke me up, saying someone was ringing the doorbell. Just as my phone buzzed, a woman's voice introduced herself, Mr. Lane, this is Sue from the nanny service. Yes, Sue, thanks for coming. I'm a bit out of it. The key's under the mat. Come on in and head upstairs, I replied. Soon, I heard her footsteps coming up. Sue, probably in her late 50s, took charge right away. I explained the situation, and she said about getting Hope ready for daycare while keeping an eye on Luke. Her warmth with the kids was reassuring, letting me finally get some rest. Later, a messenger arrived from Fiona's office delivering a temporary custody order and a restraining order against Kathy. Fiona called to update me, mentioning that Kathy had been served with divorce papers while in custody. She explained that between the drug charge and the recording, we had a good chance at full custody. While Sue went to pick up Hope from daycare, I went to the bank and transferred our valuables into a new safe deposit box, leaving Kathy's belongings in the old one. Across the street, I opened a new checking and savings account in my name only. While I was okay with her getting half once the divorce settled, I didn't want our money being wasted on anything illegal. Despite finally feeling some of the pain from my injuries, it wasn't as bad as I'd expected. My nose, though, was still sore, so I grabbed some chicken from the grocery store, figuring I'd cook that for dinner. At 5, Sue left, but I asked her to return the next day. Soon after, Rose showed up for dinner, much to the kids' delight. Hope asked to see Rose's police weapon, and Rose carefully explained how dangerous real weapons were, satisfying her curiosity. She kept glancing at me, likely noticing how rough I looked. Her concern was clear. I couldn't help but milk it a bit, pretending to feel a bit more dizzy than I actually was. She settled on the couch with the kids to watch a children's movie, and I joined them, joking that her presence was reassuring. During the second movie, Rose told me how she questioned Tom Grossman. She made me swear to keep it between us. Apparently, Tom was holed up in a hotel in the next town over and was scared stiff. Rose had shown him the recording, pointing out the part where he seemed to throw himself backward toward me in the camera. She'd even listed my injuries for comparison, making it clear he'd gotten off lightly. Rose told him she'd be more than willing to press charges on my behalf, though she warned that if I retaliated, he could face serious consequences. Tom, it seemed, had no interest in pressing charges against me. I thanked her, adding that since I didn't remember much of what happened, I wouldn't pursue anything against him, though I'd probably send a copy of the video to his wife as a parting gift. Rose left around 11, and I settled back in bed with the kids. As the days passed, I avoided all contact with Kathy, leaving any communication to my lawyer. My ribs were on the mend within a few weeks, though my nose took longer to heal. After Kathy moved out, I took the chance to redo the bedroom just the way I liked. Fresh paint, chrome molding, new curtains, and a huge 4-poster bed with matching furniture, all dark, solid wood. It finally felt like my own space. I'd managed to convince Rose to spend several evenings over at my place. I hadn't exactly made a move yet, but I was planning on it once my nose fully healed. That thing was still tender, and I didn't want to mess it up again. Work was going smoothly too. I'd been able to hire Sue whenever I had to stay out of town, which, thanks to Rachel's efforts, was happening less and less. Eventually, my doctor cleared me, and I figured it was time to finally make my intentions clear. One night, Rose and I were watching a movie, and I got up to grab us both some ice cream. Instead of sitting back in my chair when I returned, I joined her on the couch, a bit closer than usual. We sat there, quietly enjoying the ice cream and the movie. After a moment, I put my arm around her, and she turned to me with a questioning look. "Where are you up to tonight?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. The doctor gave my nose a clean bill of health. "No more holding back," I said with a grin. "I'm making a move, is that clear enough?" She flushed, glancing away. "Why would you want to kiss me? I'm not exactly beautiful." I gently placed a finger on her lips. "Rose, you're perfect to me. You've got this amazing personality, a warmth I can't get enough of, and you've got those eyes. Can we kiss now?" She started to say something, but I didn't let her finish. I leaned in, and we shared a kiss that felt like something I'd been waiting forever for. The night turned out to be unforgettable, even though we didn't make it through the movie, and to my surprise, she agreed to see me again the next night. The next time we met, Rose looked more relaxed. She told me she'd only kissed one other guy, a bit of a disaster by her account. She opened up about her insecurities, but I didn't let her dwell on them. I asked if she'd be free on Saturday night, and she invited me to her place for dinner. When Saturday came, she greeted me at the door, dressed in a dark blouse and pants. I couldn't help but tease her. "Why always the dark colors? What's wrong with a bit of brightness?" Rose laughed, and I handed her a bouquet of long-stemmed roses along with a box of chocolates. She blushed, and I leaned in for a kiss. It had been a while since I'd felt this way about anyone, and I could tell she felt the same. "So, what's for dinner?" I asked, inhaling the delicious scent coming from the kitchen. "Shepherd's pie. It's in the oven," she replied. "Mind turning it off for a while?" I said, giving her a playful grin. She hesitated, then turned off the oven. We shared a passionate evening, and afterward, we both collapsed on the couch, savoring the closeness. When we eventually got to the shepherd's pie, it was a bit overcooked, but we didn't mind. I devoured a couple of large pieces along with garlic bread to refuel, while Rose, looking as happy as I'd ever seen her, joined me. She seemed almost amazed, smiling as she whispered, "This is my lucky day." Later that night, as we were cozying up on the couch, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Rose's neighbor and friend, Beth, was calling repeatedly. When Rose finally picked up, Beth was frantic. "Rose, are you okay? We're all out here ready to break down the door, but we figured we'd wait since you're a cop," Beth said in a rush. Rose rolled her eyes, glancing at me. "Everything's fine, Beth. I just got a friend over, didn't mean to disturb you." "Is it that good-looking guy from yesterday?" Beth asked, clearly curious. Rose smiled at me. "Yep, that's him." From outside, we heard laughter and cheers. Apparently, Rose's single neighbors had all come over to check on her. That night, we kept them entertained, so to speak. When morning came, I woke early, showered, and got dressed, apologizing to Rose as I prepared to head out to pick up my kids. She gave me a sleepy smile and kissed me, promising to see me again soon. I made sure she was okay, locked her door, and headed out, still feeling a bit dazed. As I stepped out, a small group of her neighbors, some with cameras, gave me a round of applause. Feeling both amused and embarrassed, I bowed slightly, which earned a few giggles. They extended their hands like royalty, and I walked past them, humming an old tune my grandfather used to sing. Those mornings stay with me, reminding me that I could find happiness again. Over the next few months, things settled into a good rhythm. I didn't get to spend too many nights with Rose since I was with Hope and Luke, but the times we did have together were wonderful. However, two issues cropped up. First, Rose kept herself emotionally guarded. We'd get close, but then she'd pull back as if putting up some wall. And secondly, she only ever wore dark colors, black, gray, sometimes a white blouse. I wanted to shake her and say, dress like you're celebrating life, not mourning it. Meanwhile, the divorce was finally moving forward. Fiona had offered Kathy a fair settlement, but they turned it down, despite Fiona warning that it was likely the best deal they'd get. Through the divorce process, I learned Kathy's infidelity had started 6 months before I caught her. Apparently, it all began at a party thrown by Dan, my former friend, while I was out of town. Dan had gotten Kathy drunk and involved her in his usual wild antics, which led to a 2-month affair of parties and escapades whenever I wasn't around. Eventually, Dan, afraid I'd find out, passed her off to Tom, who continued the affair until the night I walked in on them. Kathy had been convicted on the drug charges and had entered rehab. Despite everything, she somehow clung to the notion that I'd forgive her or agree to joint custody. She even asked her therapist to reach out to me. It turned out she'd willingly gone along with all of it, neglecting me and our children while offloading them to her parents whenever I was out of town. Her family, who'd always disapproved of me, thought I was too soft for their daughter, believing beauty meant weakness. They'd never see my kids again if I had anything to say about it. The day of the divorce finally arrived. In court, we presented the evidence, including the video. The judge seemed almost bewildered by Kathy's behavior and granted the divorce under Fiona initial terms, though she looked displeased by how easily Kathy's side had gotten off. Kathy received half of our joint assets and retirement accounts, though she was excluded from my company pension. I was also required to pay her half the equity in our house, but most importantly, I was awarded full custody of the kids. Kathy was granted 2 supervised visits per month, each lasting 4 hours, but neither of us would pay child support. Additionally, I was required to keep her on my health insurance for 5 years, unless she remarried. Fiona had managed to deduct the loans I'd given to Kathy's family from her share of the assets, which left her with roughly $350,000 outside of her retirement accounts. Kathy ended up covering her own legal fees and her share of the costs, while Fiona, my attorney, insisted on waiving the fee for me. She says she owed Rachel for all the ways Rachel had helped her over the years and knew I'd supported Rachel and the company for as long as anyone could remember. Tom Grossman skipped town shortly after the divorce, and his wife filed to end things. Dan, my former friend, moved across town and avoided me at all costs. It was no surprise, considering the role he'd played in my troubles. Not long after my divorce was finalized, Rose decided to end our romantic relationship, saying she didn't see a future between us but wanted to stay friends. I had to admit I was disappointed, though I'd noticed her holding back emotionally. A couple of weeks later, she mentioned she'd met a local FBI agent. I wished her all the best, but we continued meeting for lunch or the occasional dinner as friends. About a month after Rose and I had parted ways, I was getting the kids ready for bed when I heard odd noises at the front door, a soft scratching, and what sounded like whimpering. Thinking it was a lost dog, I opened the door only to find Kathy leaning against the screen, barefoot and without a coat. It was close to 1 a.m., and she looked utterly distraught. I carefully opened the door, lifted her inside, and noticed she was unresponsive. Worried, I decided not to call the police right away. Instead, I thought she needed warmth. I ran a hot bath, remembering the temperature she used to like, and gently placed her in it. I'd even set up the TV with one of her old favorite shows, I Love Lucy, hoping it would soothe her. She loved that show whenever she was feeling down. I whipped up a strawberry smoothie and grabbed a bottle of water, bringing them to her with a straw. She looked as if she hadn't eaten in days, so I made a grilled cheese sandwich and some chips. Kathy ate everything without saying a word, and I could tell she was afraid I'd send her back out. She stayed in the bath for a good 2 hours, likely worried that if she got out, she'd have nowhere to go. Eventually, I handed her one of my robes and firmly instructed her to stand up and put it on. Then, I helped her to the guest room, setting her down on the bed with more I Love Lucy DVDs and a bottle of water. "We'll talk in the morning," I told her. Thankfully, it was Saturday, so I didn't have to worry about work. After taking her clothes to the laundromat, I fell asleep, wondering what had driven her to this point. The next morning, I decided to surprise her by letting the kids wake her up. I took Hope and looked to the guest room, telling them I had a surprise. Their faces lit up, and they eagerly ran to her, shouting, "Mommy, Mommy." Kathy's eyes flew open, and she hugged them tightly, showering them with kisses and tears as if she hadn't seen them in years, even though she'd had supervised visits recently. It was bittersweet watching her reunite with them, knowing all we'd been through. Eventually, the kids settled down, and Kathy offered to make them breakfast. They looked at me with hopeful eyes, and I gave her a nod of approval. After breakfast, while the kids got distracted with their toys and TV, I sat down with Kathy at the kitchen table to talk. "Kathy, you can't stay here forever. I need to know what's going on," I began. "Arthur," she replied with a sigh, "my family never accepted you. They thought you were too soft. If they'd seen you that night with Tom, they'd have been terrified. They kept mocking our relationship, making me believe you were cheating on me whenever you traveled. At some point, I started believing them. Dan dragged me into a world of pills and escapism, and I lost sight of everything that mattered. I've been working with a therapist to understand it all, but I know you probably don't care anymore." She took a shaky breath. "At my parents' place, they took advantage of me. They made me do all the hard work around the house and pressured me to lend them money. 2 days ago, I found out my father had been writing checks from my account, and my brother somehow ended up with my car." I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "First, we'll go to the bank, then file a police report. You don't have to press charges, but this might be the push they need to return what's yours." Kathy looked defeated. "Arthur, I can't believe I trusted them and betrayed you first. It all feels like a nightmare." I nodded, my voice firm. "You're still the mother of my children, Kathy, so listen to me now." We got into the car, and Kathy found a pair of old garden shoes to wear, as she didn't even remember losing her own. At the bank, we discovered her father had siphoned off nearly $100,000, leaving her with only $250,000. We headed to the police station, where I asked to see Detective Rose Young. Rose looked surprised to see Kathy and me together, but listened as we explained the situation. She promised to investigate, and soon after, Kathy's parents were calling in a panic, though Kathy refused to speak with them. I had no issue being firm. I'd had enough. In the end, all of Kathy's belongings were returned, including her car. Her parents were forced to repay $25,000 immediately and sign a loan document for the remaining $75,000 at 12% interest over 10 years, using their house as collateral. After that, Kathy wanted nothing more to do with them. "Arthur," she said quietly, "thank you. I know I hurt you deeply and I'm still in therapy, but can I stay here in the guest room? I want to reconnect with our kids." "Kathy," I replied, "I have an offer, but you might not like it. You caused me a lot of emotional pain. If you stay, you'll have to help around the house and look after the kids. There'll be strict rules if we're going to rebuild any trust. Think carefully before agreeing." She flinched but nodded. I advised her to discuss it with her therapist. "Arthur, please believe me, I truly regret what I've done. I can't trust you yet, Kathy," I said bluntly. "One more thing, there will be video surveillance around the house. It won't be easy, so don't agree unless you're ready." Despite her therapist's reservations, Kathy accepted. We agreed she'd continue therapy, and I set up a separate room for her. She went back on birth control, bought clothes that suited a fresh start, and helped around the house. I paid her a small salary for her efforts, which the kids seemed to enjoy. We found a balance, but I kept things strictly platonic. I also confided in Rachel about the situation. She was more concerned about me than Kathy, worried that the turmoil would prevent me from finding real happiness. "Don't get trapped in this, Arthur," she cautioned. I assured her I had no intention of being pulled back into a complicated relationship. I'd even mentioned a woman I was interested in who wasn't currently available, but that I was hopeful for the future. Rachel looked relieved, happy to see I wasn't dwelling on the past. Life at the office also saw few changes. After my divorce, I worked closely with Rachel to secure additional shares in our company, Parker Incorporated. When Rachel's brothers and she inherited it, each held a 25% stake, with another 25% sold to public shareholders. Over the years, Rachel bought back shares, raising her stake to over 35%, while her brother's shares dwindled to below 20%. My role was to help her secure an additional 16% of the vote, enough to push her older brother out as CEO. With charm and dedication, I rallied the support of employees and shareholders, especially the women who controlled a large portion of the shares. It wasn't long before the transition was complete and Rachel's brother quietly retired to the Caribbean. As thanks, Rachel rewarded me with generous bonuses and a promotion, though I didn't quite make it to president. A capable manager took that role and I was offered the position of vice president. Rachel invited me out to dinner at a local Marston hotel with the best prime rib in town to celebrate. As we sipped our wine, she looked at me with genuine warmth. "Arthur, we did it. I couldn't have asked for a better partner through all this," she said, raising her glass. "I know you'll be a huge success," Rachel said, lifting her glass. But as she offered me the vice president role, I shook my head. "I'm really sorry, Rachel, but I can't accept it," I replied. Her eyes widened, and I saw the color drain from her face. "But Arthur, why?" she stammered, clearly taken aback. "As I mentioned before, there's someone I'm interested in, and to be with her, I'll need to step away from the company. Our policy doesn't allow for a relationship with a fellow employee," I explained, hoping she'd understand. She paused, looking both relieved and conflicted. "You mean another Parker employee?" Rachel said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Arthur, I can change those rules if it means keeping you here. I'm not losing you." 2 weeks earlier, I had already distanced myself from Kathy, and she seemed more relieved than upset. I had a full physical exam to ensure I was healthy and ready to pursue a new relationship. Now, I felt ready to tell Rachel exactly how I felt. But to my surprise, she seemed just as anxious. She was holding my hand, her expression full of emotion, and then I finally spoke up. "Rachel, would you like to dance?" I'd chosen the Marston for its prime rib and had everything arranged so we could have this moment together. I could see she was taken aback, but she didn't resist as I gently helped her up. "Arthur, I'm much older," she whispered, blushing slightly. I leaned in, speaking softly. "You're the one I want. Just dance with me." We danced through 4 songs, and I could tell neither of us wanted the evening to end. The food had grown cold, but I didn't care. "They do have room service here, but we'd need a room," I teased, holding up a key card. Rachel blushed as I leaned in and kissed her, sealing the night. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion. Rachel admitted she'd always had feelings for me, but thought our age difference and her position would keep us apart. But now that everything was out in the open, she was ecstatic, and so was I. When Monday rolled around, Rachel called an emergency board meeting with the president to announce that I'd resigned to pursue a romantic relationship within the company. The board, a group of mostly female executives who adored me, were both shocked and delighted. Rachel proposed a change in policy, and everyone agreed unanimously to keep me on board, restoring my position. Mary, the newly appointed president, looked at Rachel with raised eyebrows. "Rachel, you didn't mention who this mystery woman is. If anyone knows, it'd be you. So who's the lucky lady?" Rachel blushed, and after a moment said quietly, "It's me." The entire board cheered, thrilled by the unexpected announcement. For the next 3 months, Rachel and I were inseparable, meeting whenever we could. She joked that I was wearing her out with my energy, but she was determined to keep up. Since my marriage had fallen apart, I felt a renewed passion, and Rachel met me with her own enthusiasm. Our relationship was filled with laughter and joy, and we soon started discussing marriage. Then one day, she shared some unexpected news. A pregnancy test had come back positive. Nervous but overjoyed, I immediately proposed, and within weeks, we'd arranged a beautiful, intimate wedding at the Marston. Hope was our flower girl, Luke our ring bearer, with Fiona as Rachel's bridesmaid and Rose by my side as my best friend. The judge for my divorce even came, joking that he never wanted to see us in court again. After the ceremony, Rachel and I moved into the family estate she'd bought from her brother, now our new home. She even allowed Kathy to stay in a separate area so Hope and Luke could be close to their mother. Kathy continued as a nanny and housekeeper, dressing in the colorful clothes I preferred, and our family settled into a comfortable routine. However, as Rachel's pregnancy progressed, she struggled to keep up with everything, especially as her energy waned. She noticed the familiar tension in my eyes, a sign that I was feeling the strain, and she decided it was time to propose a creative solution. One day, Rachel pulled Kathy aside. "Would you be open to helping Arthur a bit more directly?" she asked, a gleam in her eye. Kathy's face lit up, but Rachel cautioned her that she'd need to discuss it with me first. When she brought it up to me, I was torn. I loved Rachel deeply and felt guilty even considering her suggestion, but seeing her struggle with pregnancy pains and fatigue weighed on me. In the end, we talked it over with honesty, and she assured me she trusted me completely. I agreed to the arrangement, though I made her promise she'd never feel unloved or neglected. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Rose came to us in tears, having just gone through a devastating breakup. Her boyfriend, an FBI agent, had betrayed her trust, using her personal life against her professionally. Rose was heartbroken, and I'd never seen her so vulnerable. Rachel knew exactly what to do. She reached out to Fiona, who promptly took legal action against Rose's ex, ensuring he'd face severe consequences. Then Rachel hired Rose to lead our new corporate security department, giving her both purpose and stability. Rose moved in with us, and while she initially seemed awkward around me, she eventually opened up about her insecurities, confessing that she'd always felt unworthy of me. I reassured her, and as time went on, our friendship blossomed. 8 months into Rachel's pregnancy, I hadn't experienced true intimacy with her for several months, and I could tell she felt guilty. She brought it up to Rose, suggesting that perhaps she could offer me the emotional connection I'd been missing. At first, Rose was hesitant, worried about the impact on Rachel and our marriage, but Rachel's trust and confidence reassured her. After much discussion, I finally agreed. Having Rose back in my life in this way felt both familiar and comforting, and her presence brought a renewed sense of balance to our household. I noticed how she slowly embraced brighter colors and even started wearing dresses around the house, which seemed to lift her spirits. A year later, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My life felt out of control, exhilarating yet overwhelming. Between Rachel's love and my own inner turmoil, it seemed like I was just a passenger in my own life, unable to regain control. The part of me I jokingly referred to as the critter adored Rachel, but at times I felt I needed someone else to talk to, someone who could help me sort through this chaos. Since I wasn't comfortable sharing these feelings with others, I decided to write everything down. When I was with my kids, the critter receded and I felt more at peace. I planned to take advantage of that clarity to understand what I wanted from life. Meanwhile, on a different day across town, Elizabeth, a psychiatrist and aspiring romance author, prepared to meet a new client. She was deep into her latest novel when her secretary, Julie, buzzed in to announce her 2 o'clock appointment. Elizabeth put down her manuscript, bracing herself for what she suspected might be a complicated session. When I entered with me in my arms, Elizabeth was visibly taken aback. She looked at us as if she'd never seen a man with his child before. Trying to remain professional, she introduced herself as Dr. Jones, though I noticed a hint of warmth in her eyes as she cooed at my daughter. "Please, call me Arthur," I said, setting me down in a chair. "I've been struggling with something unusual. I'm not sure if I have a split personality, but I've kept a sort of diary documenting my experiences. If you could read through it, I'd appreciate your advice. Charge me for your time, but maybe we could meet again next week." The look on her face was filled with such empathy, I felt an immediate sense of relief. "Of course, Arthur," she replied, her voice soft. "I'll read it carefully, and we'll meet at the same time next week." Over the following week, Elizabeth read my journal multiple times, studying not only my words, but the photos I'd included. One photo in particular seemed to capture her attention, a family Christmas card. It showed me surrounded by 4 women and her children. Rachel sat to my right, visibly pregnant, while Kathy, wearing her maid's uniform, sat on the floor with the children. Rose held me on her lap, her face soft and kind. Elizabeth couldn't believe what she was seeing. Night after night, she found herself drawn to that photo, comparing herself to the women in it, wondering how I'd ended up with a family so unconventional. When I returned the next week with Mia, Elizabeth began discussing the critter I'd written about. She said it sounded like a protective instinct, something that might have developed as a coping mechanism during my years in foster care. "Maybe it's not something to fear, Arthur. It sounds like a part of you that's always tried to protect you in challenging times. Have you thought about giving it a different name? Something less ominous?" I considered her suggestion, a smile creeping onto my face. "What about Billy?" "I don't think anyone's ever been scared of a Billy." Elizabeth laughed, a sound that seemed to light up the room. "Billy sounds perfect. Who could fear Billy?" As we continued talking, I noticed Elizabeth's face softened, and she held my gaze with a warmth I wasn't used to. We spoke more about my life, my family, and my new role. Rachel had decided that my skills were best used as a board member and special assistant, freeing me from the intense hours of my former position. The arrangement allowed me more time with my family, and Elizabeth smiled at the idea. The next week, I showed up at her office with a different concern. Rachel, now pregnant again, had suggested bringing another woman into our household. Rose and Kathy were also expecting, and Rachel was concerned I'd be left unattended, as she put it, during the hectic months ahead. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. "This is absurd, Elizabeth," I sighed. "I know Rachel loves me, but it feels like we're crossing every boundary society sets." Elizabeth took my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Arthur, I understand you're feeling overwhelmed. Would you let me talk to Rachel? I think we can work something out." The idea of Elizabeth meeting Rachel made me nervous, but I trusted her judgment. "All right, but please, Elizabeth, don't ruin things for me. Rachel's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The next day, with my permission, Elizabeth met Rachel at our home. They spent hours discussing my concerns, and by the end, Rachel seemed to understand that, while we loved our unconventional life, it was pushing me beyond my comfort zone. Elizabeth suggested that I start attending therapy sessions more regularly, even daily, to help manage the complexities of our family dynamics. Then, to my surprise, Elizabeth looked at Rachel and made a quiet request. "Rachel, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would it be all right if I became part of this family as well? Arthur is someone I deeply respect, and I'd like to support him however I can." Rachel smiled, her approval clear. "I think Arthur would be delighted. The following Christmas, our family sent out a holiday card with Elizabeth now included. The card showed Rachel, Rose, Kathy, and Elizabeth, each of them either holding a child or visibly pregnant. We looked like an unusual family, but everyone wore radiant smiles. One evening, as we were preparing for bed, I asked Rachel, "Honey, I noticed that Judge Wallace has been stopping by often. Should I be worried?" Rachel chuckled. "No, Arthur, there's no trouble. She's just interested in making sure we're all well taken care of. And besides, she's always had her eye on you." She winked and I couldn't help but laugh, feeling grateful for the happiness and stability we found together. As time passed, I felt truly at peace. My family, once fractured, was now whole and brimming with love and support. The critter, or Billy as I now called him, had found his place in this vibrant, unconventional household. And surrounded by strong, caring women and wonderful children, I finally felt like the luckiest man alive. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.